What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 232 of the DFS Dose podcast, your fix of daily fantasy sports information, strategy, and analysis. I'm your host, Ben Hauver, joined as I always am by Joey Carrion, and on today's show, we are delving into our wide receiver rankings. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been going position by position. You can find our thoughts on quarterback in this podcast feed, on running back in this podcast feed. And today we go on part one of our part three journey through wide receivers. Let's start off with some fireworks at the top, where we have both officially moved Justin Jefferson to number one. We are on JJ wide receiver one overall season, and all the stars are aligning for the Minnesota Star.
Justin Jefferson, I think, is just going to have a monster season in 2022. He gets an upgrade in coaching, going from Mike Zimmer as the head coach to Kevin O'Connell, who was the former Rams coordinator of last year. And we all know what Cooper Kupp did last year, and the specific quotes around how Kevin O'Connell is going to use Justin Jefferson is pretty much essentially that they are going to build the passing offense around him, and he is going to put him in that Cooper Kupp role. And I think that we can expect the Vikings to be a little bit more pass heavy this year. They were 18th in pass rate in 2021. So if we see that jump up to, let's say, top 10 or top 8, obviously that's more targets to go around for the Vikings skill position players. And I think all it comes down to is Justin Jefferson is just one of the most dominant players in the league, right? Coming out of his second season in the NFL, 167 targets, 108 catches, 1,600 yards, 10 touchdowns, 75% Whopper, which was first in the NFL. And the man is just good. It's that simple. He's just
Great.
good. He was number one in air yards in the NFL. He was number one in deep targets. He was number 8 in red zone targets, but he was number 25 in catchable target rate. So if Kirk Cousins can improve a little bit in this new system, I think, like you said, the stars are just aligning for Justin Jefferson to absolutely smash this season. So I think he is the correct wide receiver one overall this year.
I agree. And I mean, it just comes down to, a player who's betting on themselves. He even said in a quote earlier this week that he believes he will be widely considered the wide receiver one in the NFL after this coming year. And it's just nice to see a player with some confidence. Been a lot of quotes out there lately of guys who just don't have confidence in themselves. And how can we have confidence in them if they don't have confidence in themselves? Miles Sanders, don't take me in fantasy. Josh Jacobs, not sure he's going to be a bell cow. Like all that stuff, put it to the side. Justin Jefferson, he believes, and he's going to capitalize on this opportunity. And like you mentioned, 167 targets. He already has the volume. We don't need to project a giant role change for him. He just needs to catch more of them. 59 missed catches out of those 167 targets. He gets 20 more of those, and he's got 1,800 yards and 12, 13 touchdowns. He's probably the wide receiver one with that kind of production.
Yeah, no, for sure. And obviously that's not to say Cooper Kupp isn't a great pick this year, because he is. And obviously he's both of our wide receiver twos. But I just think that Cooper Kupp is just one of the major regression candidates. Like, his 2021 was probably a complete outlier, right? Like, if we're just looking in the grand scheme of things, he's a 28, 29-year-old big slot receiver who was pretty solid throughout his first 5 years in the NFL, and then he just has a, record-breaking season out of nowhere, pretty much. Obviously, Matt Stafford helps a ton, and Matt Stafford is a team elevator. He's a talent elevator at the position for sure. But I don't think we can expect Cooper Kupp to go for 1,900 yards and 16 touchdowns again, especially with Cam Akers going to be healthy from week 1. That takes some opportunity away. They went out and signed Allen Robinson, who I personally believe is the best wide receiver too that they will have had in the last few years on the Rams. So that's more competition added. I think Cooper Kupp is still a great pick, and him and Stafford have a great connection. I just think Justin Jefferson's ceiling and talent is higher than Cooper Kupp's for this year. But, if you have Cooper Kupp ranked as your wide receiver 1, nobody will blame you. Like that's the consensus.
I agree, and I mean, no cup, no cash was a motto to live by in DFS last year, but it just screams regression. Everything that you said about this situation, it would be so hard for him to replicate those stats, and he could have a great season without doing so. I mean, I think that he's likely to be top 5 again. Nothing has really changed in the situation besides, the upgrade at wide receiver 2 to Allen Robinson. But I mean, there's more than enough room for Cooper Kupp to command 10 plus targets per week once again. And Stafford has historically locked on to his wide receiver 1. We saw it all the time in the Calvin Johnson days. And I think that he will find that same reliability in Kupp. If there is one player likely, or even maybe not likely, but that has the potential to shock the league this year and finish above these two guys, I think it's Jamar Chase. I could see Chase having that Justin Jefferson like rise where Jefferson, his targets just went up incredibly from year 1 to year 2. That's sort of the issue with Chase, where he was at 128, which is good, but it's just not the volume needed to be the true wide receiver 1. He had good touchdown production, 13 touchdowns, almost 1,455 yards as a rookie, which is incredible. We know the talent's there. He's attached to a great quarterback. It really just will become a matter of whether or not the Bengals pass the ball more. I think in 2022, I have Jamar Chase at 3, as you do as well. Do you think that Chase has it in him to elevate and put up a record-breaking season this year?
Yeah, I definitely think it's well within the range, and I think that he's going number 3 just because his ceiling is extremely high, right? We've seen him in his rookie season put up a 50 ball, and that's just the type of player he is, a generational talent, and we were all over it last offseason, especially me. I was drafting him in every single draft, and it worked out. But like you said, the question is the volume and will the Bengals pass the ball more? Cincinnati was 13th in pass play percentage last year. So they were top half in the NFL, but it just felt like at times they just went super run heavy with Joe Mixon, and Joe Mixon was top 3 in touches out of all running backs in the league. So we just need some of that to go down. But I also think we can attribute that to, it being Joe Burrow's first year removed off that torn ACL, and maybe they just wanted to get him, or to get his legs under him, get him back in the rhythm of things, especially early in the season. And then, to end the season, Cincinnati was operating at like a 65% passing clip, which was 5th in the NFL. So if we see the Bengals go from 59% to 65%, I think that's going to open up the floodgates for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And I think that Zach Taylor is, kind of a sharp coach, and I think he'll realize that his best plays will involve getting Jamar Chase and T. Higgins the ball through the air rather than, running Joe Mixon into the back of the O-line.
Yep. Totally agree. And I mean, I think for the vast majority of NFL wide receivers, a season where you put up 81 catches for 1,400 yards and 13 touchdowns is like the best season they're ever going to have. And he did that as a stone cold rookie. So the ceiling is untapped even still for Jamar Chase. I'm excited to see what he does in year 2. Wide receiver 4, Stefan Diggs for both of us. And he's kind of in this weird range where he's going a couple picks after these guys, but I don't think it's outside of, the realm of possibility that Stefan Diggs finishes as the wide receiver 1 overall in this Josh Allen-led Bills offense. We know that the pass rate is going to be there all it takes is just a couple of monster games on Diggs' part, which we know is in his range. And I think that Diggs could be potentially a league winner in round 1. He seems sort of like the X factor, like that guy, sometimes he goes as wide receiver 4 in drafts. Sometimes he's wide receiver 5 behind Adams, but wide receiver 1 is absolutely in his range.
Yeah, I definitely agree that this is around the time where the cutoff for the players to be able to finish as the wide receiver 1 overall ends. And maybe we'll include like the next 2 players that we'll talk about. But Diggs, that's definitely well within his range. Obviously, didn't have a disappointing 2021, but it wasn't what everybody expected. He had a lot of games where he was only scoring 14 to 15 points and just felt like there was a lot left to be desired with his 2021. He only had one game the entire year where he went over 25 PPR points just in regular scoring. Only 2 games with over 100 yards, but he was 5th in the NFL in targets, right? And he had a 65% Whopper, higher than Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is below some other guys like Hollywood Brown and Tyler Lockett in terms of last year for Whopper. So Diggs just has the volume. He has the role. Just need more consistency this season, and I think that he's a very good pick, and he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and he's attached to a top 3 quarterback in the league. So Diggs is always a good pick, and I think you could make the case that he could be above Jamar Chase. But as of right now, I have him as my wide receiver 4, as do you. So,
yep, I absolutely love taking shots on Diggs. I think that he could easily regress in a positive way after finishing with about 300 less yards than he had in 2020 on only 2 less targets. He just didn't. He just wasn't as consistent. That's really what it comes
He was
down
number
to.
2 in air yards behind Justin Jefferson last year, and only finished with 1,200 yards, and Justin Jefferson finished with 1,600. So, like I said, there was just a lot left on the bone there in terms of potential yards and fantasy points with Stefan Diggs. So, if that regresses positively, I think we could see Diggs have another great season, 2020-esque.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree with that. Let's get to a hot take. Coming from your rankings.
It's not hot. It's not hot.
I think it's hot.
It's not
I think
hot.
it's hot. I mean, you've got the player that Justin Jefferson called the best wide receiver in the league outside your top 5 for a player who, has the raw talent, hasn't proved it. CeeDee Lamb as your wide receiver 5. You don't think that's a hot take?
I don't think that's a hot take for this year.
Tell us why.
Well, obviously, Devante Adams is a great player, and I actually drafted Devante Adams in the last draft that we did in the first round. But I think that the target opportunity for CeeDee Lamb is just going to be off the charts this year. You lose Amari Cooper. I think that's a big loss for the Cowboys passing game, and it's a great loss for CeeDee Lamb shares, right? Amari Cooper, 103 targets last year, had an 18% target share. CeeDee Lamb was at 20%. So you're losing that on offense. Michael Gallup, torn ACL, and we know historically receivers struggle coming off torn ACLs the next season. So even if Michael Gallup comes back in week 4, week 5, or week 6, or whenever the fuck he comes back, there's still a good chance that he could struggle in that, in those first couple games of him being back. So other than that, who do they have? They have James Washington, a career scrub. They have Jalen Tolbert, who, I was high on pre-draft. Good landing spot for him. I think he's fine, whatever. He led his conference in receiving yards. I think he's a solid talent. But other than that, who do they have? Who's going to compete for targets on that team? Oh, Dalton Schultz. We're scared of Dalton Schultz now? No. Okay, we're not scared of Dalton Schultz. Dallas was the best offense in the NFL last year. They were the highest scoring offense in the NFL last year at 31 points per game. They were 11th in pass rate. Zeke, trash. Who are they going to give the ball to? CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard. It's that simple. So for those reasons, give me CeeDee Lamb this year. I just think that the target opportunity and the offensive environment is going to be off the charts, and I just think that it's better than Las Vegas. And I think Devante Adams downgrading from Aaron Rodgers, who was PFF's second-ranked quarterback last year, to Derek Carr, who was PFF's 16th ranked quarterback last year. I think that's going to be a huge factor.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more on the Devante Adams front. Adams has just been consistently incredible for the past couple of years. He's finished as wide receiver 5 or better in every year since 2018, but the downgrade from Rodgers to Carr I don't think can be understated enough. Obviously, they do still have some chemistry together. Apparently a big factor was Adams and Carr's chemistry and why they acquired Adams, but I just think the touchdowns are going to come down with Adams. That's really what it comes down to. And for Lamb, going back to him real quick, I think that's what needs to increase. He has 11 career touchdowns over his first 2 seasons. That's, 11 touchdowns in 32 games. That's a pretty low rate for a player with as much raw talent as CeeDee Lamb has. So if Lamb can, get the ball in the end zone a few more times, I think he absolutely has the potential to elevate to top 5 and, what the fuck word am I looking for? And conversely, I do believe the touchdowns for Adams will be coming down this season.
Yeah, I mean, Adams just has higher target or, higher quality competition for targets, more so than he's ever had ever since, he elevated to the top of the league at the wide receiver position. And, you have a downgrading quarterback. I referenced PFF rankings, which, they have their own scale and what they do. Like, Derek Carr was ranked behind quarterbacks like Jimmy Garoppolo, Ryan Tannehill, and Mac Jones for last year. Obviously, he's probably better than that, but I think the downgrade is pretty massive going from Rodgers to Derek Carr. Then you also have to factor in, Darren Waller, top-tier tight end, Hunter Renfrow, a bunch of running backs that should see opportunity. I just don't think Devante Adams. Let me rephrase that. I think that Devante Adams is obviously still a good pick just because he is a very great player. But I personally think CeeDee Lamb's third-year breakout will be in full effect this year as the number one option on one of the best offenses in the NFL with a better quarterback in Dak Prescott over Derek Carr.
That is all very fair to me. Wide receiver 7, we both have Mike Evans going there. And honestly, I don't know what needs to be said. Mike Evans is just Mr. Consistent. This dude's put up 8 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and I would be absolutely stunned if we weren't getting ready to witness number 9.
Yeah, I mean, not much you need to say about Mike Evans. He's consistently going to give you, 1,000+ yards and probably 10+ touchdowns every single year. And then you factor in Chris Godwin, being out towards ACL. Leonard Fournette is fat now, and who knows what's going to go on with that. Mike Evans is the guy on the offense, in my opinion, and him and Brady have shown that they have a very solid connection. So you literally cannot go wrong with Mike Evans.
At number 8, this is where I'm getting hot right here. I've got Mike Williams as my wide receiver 8. That is pretty goddamn high compared to his consensus ranking of wide receiver 13, which has risen. I mean, a couple months ago, Mike Evans was a 4th round pick. Now he's consistently going around the 2-3 turn. I'm all in on the Mike Evans breakout. I've talked about it a couple times throughout the offseason. For me, I just think that it is time. Everything is sort of aligned perfectly for him to take the leap, become the wide receiver one over Keenan Allen in this offense. I still think Keenan is going to be a consistent factor, but Mike Will has the type of ceiling that I don't think that Keenan possesses. Justin Herbert is on the precipice of leaping into the Patrick Mahomes tier of just wild, raw talent, league-winning talent, could take the Chargers to the Super Bowl this year. Mike Williams saw a massive spike in his usage last year after having a previous career-high target number of 90. He was up to 129 last year, had 9 touchdowns, 1,100 yards. It was a breakout year for him. He got rewarded with $60 million guaranteed, 3-year contract, age 27. I think everything is just set up for Mike Williams to have that sort of monster elevated year from his previous expectations, the same way that Cooper Kupp did. We saw it a year before Cooper Kupp happened, right? Where he started the first half of the year as an elite wide receiver and it dropped off in the second half. That's what we saw last year when Mike Williams was the wide receiver 3 in points per game over the first 6 games, right there putting up, similar points per game to guys like Adams and Debo Samuel, who had monster years. He just needs to be a little bit more consistent. And I think that, the coaching staff, Staley, he's a sharp coach. They're going to go back, look at Mike Williams, what he was doing at the beginning of the year, and try and figure out how to consistently give him that production down, for the entirety of the season. So I'm all in on the Mike Will breakout. I could see him being a first-round pick next year. Am I too bullish on him?
I mean, I don't hate it. I think that having him above Tyreek Hill and Debo is probably bad, but there's definitely ways that both of those guys regress pretty heavily in 2022, and it's really, like you said about the first half of Mike Williams last year, it's just all about the role on the offense, right? He had that very fantasy-friendly, big slot kind of role that Cooper Kupp had early last year. 4 out of his first 5 games, he had 9+ targets, right? He had multiple games where he had 10, 12, 16 targets early in the season. Then they decided to put him back in the role that he previously played throughout his career, and he didn't go over 10 targets again until week 18. And he was consistently at 5 to 7 targets per game from week 8 on. So it's going to just be hard for him to get there if he plays in that same role. But the offensive environment is obviously one of the best in the NFL. The Chargers were 5th in pass rate last year. Justin Herbert, per Vegas odds, is the favorite to lead the NFL in passing yards and passing touchdowns. So I think that you just want any players attached to him. And Mike Williams obviously showed that last year he does have, league winning upside when put in that favorable role in that offense. It's just going to be hard to know off rip, or right now I should say, that will he have that role? That's really my question. And you believe that he will. And if he does, he's probably going to smash his ADP. He finished as a wide receiver 12 last year, even in that quote-unquote bad role. And he's going as, the wide receiver 13 right now on Underdog. So I think if he's in that more favorable role, especially with Keenan Allen kind of declining recently and he's getting up there, Mike Williams has the potential to be, a top 7, top 6 wide receiver when it's all said and done.
I think there are also paths to him just breaking in more favorable scenarios for more touchdowns. He had 16 end zone targets last year that was converted to only 5 touchdowns. He left some meat on the bones out there. So if he gets a role increase and some more positive touchdown variance, God, sky is the absolute limit for Mike Williams.
Yeah, I mean, he was number 8 in red zone targets, number 12 in deep targets. And like you said, not that many touchdowns. He had nine touchdowns. So if he gets a couple more, he's probably going to smash this year.
Next up, we've got this combination of wide receivers that I would classify as absolutely elite, but the situations are so different from last year, which is, I think, what is pushing them down the rankings. Tyreek Hill and Debo Samuel, two guys that would be in a lot of top fives if we're talking raw talent, but, you know, Tyreek Hill obviously gets the downgrade from Patrick Mahomes to Tua, and Debo is in a sort of unknown situation where he still really hasn't been around 49ers camp that much, and Jimmy G will no longer be starting. They have Trey Lance, who could be anywhere from elite to dog water. We have no idea what's going to happen in that situation. How are you looking at Tyreek and Debo this year as guys that we know can do it from a talent perspective, and they've done it in the past from a production standpoint, but we just don't know about these situations?
Yeah, obviously I'm still taking shots on them in drafts for sure, and I have it ranked as Tyreek Hill 8 and Debo 9. So I think I would be a little bit higher on Tyreek Hill, but I think it's just tough. We just don't know how these situations are going to play out. Like, Debo has came out and expressed that he doesn't want to play that, you know, wide running back role that they kind of termed for him last year. Like, he's came out and literally been against that. And
which is, I mean, can we not understate how big of a problem that could be for him? I mean, this man had more rushing touchdowns than receiving touchdowns last year.
Yeah, exactly. And him and Cooper Kupp, I think, are the two wide receivers due for the biggest regression in 2022. So just for that reason, I am a little bit lower on Debo, and obviously he could still get there as a pure wide receiver. Like, his ceiling is enormous. Week 1 of last year against Detroit, he put up 189 yards on 9 catches. Then week 4, he put up 156 yards on 8 catches and 2 touchdowns, right? So he still has an elite ceiling through the air. He's one of the best yak guys in the league, but the rushing last year was just so huge, and that's what made him like one of, if not the best fantasy wide receiver last year. And if they change his role and they don't have him do that anymore, I don't think he's that great of a pick. Like, he was 41st in routes ran last year out of the entire NFL. And I think just a lot of his opportunity came from from that rushing production. And if we don't get that, I think it's going to be a tough scene for Debo. And then in terms of Tyreek Hill, it's just how much can we factor in the downgrade from Patrick Mahomes to Tua? I know Tyreek Hill, he goes on these podcasts, he goes on his YouTube channel or whatever the fuck, and he claims that Tua's more accurate, blah, blah, all this bullshit. We know it's not true. We just know.
We know. Hang on. Let's slow our rolls here. How do we know? I've never caught a ball from Patrick Mahomes. I've never caught a ball from Tua. Have you?
I can't say that I have.
He has. So who are we? Just a couple of bums sitting here talking on a podcast. We're going to tell him that he's wrong? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Tua is better as a passer than Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. Anybody with two fucking eyeballs can see that's just not true. So Tyreek Hill is just off his rocker when it comes to that, and I just don't know how much I'm willing to factor that in. I think that you definitely have to, but I don't know how much it is going to affect him. Obviously, he's still a great talent, still has arguably the highest ceiling at the position when it comes to fantasy football. But will he be able to realize that ceiling with Tua, with, you know, Jalen Waddle there, with Mike Gesicki there? They signed Cedric Wilson. So you got some competition for targets. Chase Edmonds, good pass-catching running back. I think so. He has more competition than he ever had in Kansas City, in my opinion at least, and a major quarterback downgrade, and a major scheme downgrade, and a major coaching downgrade.
Mm.
What's the bull case for Tyreek Hill here?
I think the bull case for Tyreek Hill is just that he is the best deep threat wide receiver in the league, and that what he does from an athletic standpoint can't be covered regardless of anything. That's sort of the bull case, and that's not usually the type of case that I would particularly make, but you could definitely say that all of those things that are negative about the Tyreek Hill transition to Miami are baked into his price as he is going now, as the wide receiver 9 on Underdog. I mean, if he remains in KC, he's probably right there in that Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase tier in the top of the first round. So I think that it is baked in to his price. And I definitely also think that there are scenarios where the guys that are, suffering from all of this target competition is everybody not named Tyreek Hill. I think that, Jalen Waddle probably suffers. I think Gesicki suffers. Cedric Wilson could be a non-factor. I don't know. I think Tyreek Hill is going to get his regardless. That's just not something I'm worried about, but I have him ranked at wide receiver 9. That's what his ADP is. So I'm in line with the market. I want to buy him. I'm skeptical for all the reasons that you said, but I just don't want to fade a player with the type of talent that Tyreek has.
Yeah, definitely not in best ball, right? Like he'll still probably have games where he goes for 40 plus for sure. Like he could take that 5-yard slant route or that 10-yard in route to the house for 70. Any given moment.
Doesn't matter who throws the ball to him.
Exactly. It doesn't matter at all. But I definitely think that the floor could be very shaky, and I think we could see a lot of games where he does have like 10, 11 points. And I just don't necessarily believe we're going to get a lot of those ceiling games with Tua throwing him the ball and with all of the players that they have on that offense. And then who knows how Mike McDaniels is going to run this offense just from a philosophy standpoint. Like, is he going to go the Kyle Shanahan route and kind of protect Tua because maybe he believes he's not that good, kind of like how they did with Jimmy G? Or will they let Tua air it out and put the game or the games in the hands of Tua and let him go out there and win it and get the ball to his playmakers?
Another player that I personally think sort of fits into this category where we know the talent is there, but it's a new situation is A.J. Brown. He goes to Philly here instantly as the wide receiver 1 in this offense attached to Jalen Hurts. We still have questions around what Jalen Hurts can do as a passer. I think that there's a scenario where he takes a major step forward this year with the addition of A.J. Brown. That's been a theme around the league the past couple of years where, the teams are recognizing that their struggling quarterback needs a truly elite weapon to help elevate them. And maybe that's what the Eagles did here with A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, came into the league and had 20.2 yards per reception, which we all knew was going to come down in his second year, and it did. But what I thought was a little interesting is that it continued to come down to 13.8 last year, the worst mark of his career. He struggled with consistency. A.J. Brown, like you were alluding to with Tyreek, is a player who I'm totally confident in best ball. I think that we're absolutely going to get the monster games. That's not even a question for me, but I do wonder what the floor is in this Philadelphia offense. And I think that you might even be a little lower than I am. I have A.J. Brown at 11 and you've got him at 13.
Yeah, I think that if there's a wide receiver that is going in the top 12 right now to not finish as a wide receiver 1 this year in terms of underdog ADP, it's A.J. Brown. Philadelphia was last in pass rate at 50%. And obviously, I think we can expect that to go up. But there's also the outcome where Jalen Hurts doesn't improve as a passer, right? What if he doesn't take that step forward? And he didn't take a step forward last year, which is why they kind of changed philosophies and went run heavy, and then they ended up going 7-4. They made the playoffs, just running the ball, let Jalen Hurts do his thing on the ground too. Obviously, adding A.J. Brown helps a ton. And they have a solid core of pass catchers with Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Quez Watkins, Zach Pascal, Dallas Goedert, and then the running backs out of the backfield. But I think the floor could be extremely low with A.J. Brown. I think the quarterback play could be extremely bad at times. And I think he's kind of in a very similar situation to what he was in Tennessee. He's going to be on a team that wants to run the ball first with subpar quarterback play, but with more competition for touches. Obviously, talent-wise, he's phenomenal, right? But in terms of situation, it was a very lateral move. In my opinion, at least. The ceiling games are going to be there, but I think the games that we saw last year, where he scored 7 points against Seattle, 6 points against Jacksonville, 9 points against the Rams, 3 against the Saints, 9 against the Texans, 6 against the Dolphins. Those games are definitely 100% going to happen in 2022, and I think you're going to have a lot of those games. And so for that reason, I haven't been drafting any A.J. Brown. And like I said, there's one wide receiver that will not finish as a wide receiver one that's getting drafted as one. It is 100% A.J. Brown, and I don't even think he's finished as a wide receiver one in any season of his career. I could be wrong. You could fact check me on that.
Yeah, let me fact check you on that.
Oh, no, he finished as a wide receiver one in 2020. He finished as a wide receiver 12.
Yeah, and he was wide receiver 5 in points per game. He just missed a couple games. So he does have the elite ceiling, no doubt. But I agree, and I feel you. I think that his floor is probably the lowest of anybody in this group.
Yeah, so I think he's a fade personally, but
yeah, he definitely could be. He definitely could be. I want to be in on the Eagles this year. I don't know why. I want to. I think that him and Jalen Hurts could absolutely be like the stack that you need to ship something in week 17. One of the highest ceiling stacks out there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm on the total opposite end of the spectrum. I think you will not need that at all.
It's possible. We will find out as the season plays out. Joe, you have T. Higgins as your wide receiver 10, above A.J. Brown, above some guys that I have ranked above him like Mike Williams. You are pretty much in line with ADP with T. Higgins as the wide receiver 10. That's where he's going in ADP. It's hard for me to put him there, partly because I envision a world where the split between him and Jamar Chase is less even than it was last year and more goes to Chase. I think that that's possible. I think it's likely. But T. Higgins is still a great wide receiver in his own right, attached to a great quarterback, and, has all the positives working for him that we said for Chase and as well,
Yeah. So it's a very similar argument. I think the Bengals are going to pass more. Joe Burrow, 2 years removed from his ACL now. And I just think that the targets are just going to funnel through Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And obviously at the end of last season, T. Higgins had a couple monster games, and they were very similar in terms of Whopper. Jamar Chase was at 60.97%. T. Higgins was right there at 59.06%. You personally believe that could widen even further, and I definitely agree that it can, but I think T. Higgins is also too good enough to not get the ball to. You get what I'm saying? Like, he's one of the best, contested catch wide receivers. He's overall just a very, very talented wide receiver and kind of gets overshadowed now by Jamar Chase, but they both can play, they both can ball, and for that reason I have him above, like you said, A.J. Brown and some other guys. And overall, I just think this Bengals passing offense could take a step forward this season, and the ball is just going to go to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely don't see him finishing much lower than, top 12. So I'm totally there with you. I've been taking a decent amount of T. Higgins, just trying to mix up my exposure there. After Higgins at 10, you've got Mike Williams, so a couple spots lower than I do, but you are still above market on Mike Williams. We've already talked about him. A.J. Brown for you at 12. Keenan Allen at 13, who I have ranked at 12 in the same range as T. Higgins. Is Keenan still regarded as the wide receiver one? I mean, I think, we made the case for Mike Williams potentially taking that leap. He's going one spot ahead of Mike Williams on Underdog. That's how it's been the past couple of years. Does he have it in him to be the Chargers wide receiver one over Mike Will this season? Is that in his range?
I mean, duh.
Is it?
Yeah, obviously. Keenan Allen is just a better wide receiver than Mike Williams at the end of the day. Like, obviously, his yards per route run has declined over the last few years and whatnot. And he's getting up there in age. He turned 30. And that's probably
He's a safer wide receiver. Is he a better wide
more
receiver?
More talented? Absolutely. That's not even a question. Ask anybody. But, yeah, I mean, for the same arguments for Mike Williams, could be said for Keenan Allen. Justin Herbert is projected to lead the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns, and they are one of the most pass-heavy offenses in the NFL, and he plays in the slot, favorable position on the football field, and he's going to catch 100-plus balls and get you probably 1,100-plus receiving yards and some touchdowns to go along. So he's a good pick.
Man, I really want to argue with you about who's a better player, but I'll let you have this.
I mean, Keenan Allen is just a target earner, which I think just overall plays into your talent at the position, is your ability to earn targets. And over the last 5 years, he hasn't had a season with less than 137 targets.
Yeah, I mean, but his yards per reception is, Mike Williams has 4 seasons better than Keenan's ever had. He's just he's a low depth of target player. He's totally reliable. He's going to get open and get catches, but he's not going to, wow you with monster plays either.
Yeah.
He's just consistent.
Yeah. Consistency is key.
Consistency is key. True.
And Mike Williams is not.
I'm a fiend for upside,
yeah.
Bro. I don't care. I want the upside, bro. I'm addicted to it. Give me that ceiling. That's all I want.
Yeah, I mean, I love Mike Williams. He's like my highest on wide receiver.
Love that. All right. Wide receivers 14 through 16. We have the same guys in a different order. It's a really exciting tier, in my opinion. These are really hyper-talented guys. I think that somebody from this group has the potential to emerge as a surefire wide receiver one, somebody that we're taking in round 2 next year. I don't know which of these guys that is. Maybe you have a take. DJ Moore, Michael Pittman, Hollywood Brown. Who stands out to you most in this group of players?
Yeah, I mean, DJ Moore specifically.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
He finished top 6 in the NFL in targets last year with Sam Darnold and P.J. Walker and Cam Newton throwing him the ball. Then you get, that hypothetical upgrade at quarterback with Baker Mayfield, and DJ Moore, in my opinion, is just one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL that's kind of been plagued by bad situation, and this is probably his best situation of his career. And, Baker wasn't bad prior to a shoulder injury last year, so if we get that Baker Mayfield, I think DJ Moore definitely has a ton of upside for 2022. He is honestly just very good. 71% Whopper last year, 28% target share, 41% air yard share, top 4 in the NFL, just behind, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin. And I think just out of these guys, he's the guy that could push, like a 30% target share, in my opinion, at least. And ultimately, that's kind of what I want, is to target these wide receivers that can push 25 to 30% target shares. And I definitely think that Pittman and Hollywood can, especially Hollywood early in the season. But over the course of the entire year, DJ Moore is probably the best bet out of these guys, and that's how I have it ranked.
Yeah, see, that's the thing with Hollywood Brown. Like, I think that over the first 6 weeks of the season,
I mean, he's
or
going to
seven actually, right?
he's going to fucking snap.
Yeah, I mean, Hollywood is going to be like a top 5
Yeah,
wide receiver.
yeah.
I honestly believe that for the first 6 weeks of the season. So it's like, how much do you value that when I think I prefer more in Pittman to him, over the course of the year, but the spike weeks that he has the potential to put up early and just give you a nice lead in these tournaments is really phenomenal. So it's hard to figure out how to gauge that. But I mean, Hollywood Brown is going to be clear-cut Kyler Murray's number one option until DeAndre Hopkins returns. Still will have a good role after, but they really have nobody to compete with targets outside of, the corpse of A.J. Brown and, Rondale Moore, who's like 4'6".
Yeah, like I said, I think Hollywood Brown is going to absolutely snap the first 6 weeks of the year. He could be a 25-30% target share guy. Obviously, one of the best deep threats in the league, and attached to Kyler Murray, his college quarterback, in a better, more favorable system going from Baltimore to Arizona. I think he's a great pick for this first 6 weeks. Obviously, when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, he becomes the wide receiver 2 on the offense. But I think the overall offensive efficiency when DeAndre Hopkins comes back will improve. And I think that will help Hollywood, and he still will be able to have multiple spike weeks, even with D-Hop being the alpha in that offense. So I still think he's a very, very good pick. He's one of my highest owned wide receivers in best ball, and I find myself drafting him a ton in the 4th round.
Yep, I love getting as much exposure as possible. And then Michael Pittman, I mean, he's really just in a good spot. There's no competition for targets. From weeks 13 through 18 last year, he had a 31% target share. They've done very little, I think, to surround him with any legitimate competition. They did bring in Alec Pierce. Paris Campbell is healthy for now, but Pittman is clear-cut established as the wide receiver 1 for Matt Ryan. They have a good offensive line. He had a pretty good breakout, considering he's about to go into his 3rd year. He more than doubled his production from his rookie season and is now playing with the best quarterback that he's ever had. So Pittman, surefire wide receiver 2 with the potential, I think, to elevate if his touchdowns go up.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. He can be, that wide receiver that's going to have a 25 to 30% target share, and that's obviously very valuable. So I think after these 3 guys, there's a teardrop for me, at least. And Michael Pittman was pretty good last year. He was 4th in route win percentage in the entire NFL. So he was winning on his routes. Obviously, Carson Wentz was throwing him the ball. That kind of hindered his production. But he was 14th in targets, 14th in target share with 25.7%. And I think that he's probably a good bet this year to make a 3rd-year leap. Same thing with CeeDee Lamb.
Yep. Definitely agree with that. You have Jalen Waddle ranked after this grouping as your wide receiver 17. I kind of already gave my take on this situation, where I think that there's some people out there who look at this like a 1A, 1B situation with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and I look at it more as a clear-cut Tyreek Hill is 1, Jalen Waddle is 2. And I'm pretty worried about Waddle, to be honest with you. I think he has a decent floor, but I don't know if those ceiling games are going to be there anymore with Tyreek Hill. He needed to be top 12 in the NFL in targets to finish as wide receiver 15 in points per game, full PPR. Those targets are coming down. He had a 22% target share, but he was targeted on 24% of his routes run. And I think that is what comes down with Tyreek Hill out there. I think he'll still have a good target share in that offense. I just don't think he's going to get targeted as frequently with Tyreek Hill commanding the alpha treatment there. And Waddle's a guy who needs the volume to get there. He probably finishes in this range, but I just don't know specifically for best ball what those spike weeks are going to look like and if they're even going to look like anything for him.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you with the concerns, and I just think that it's well within the range that Jalen Waddle out catches Tyreek Hill this year, just from the role that he plays on the offense. Kind of being that slot low A dot receiver. So I made my rankings based off like PPR. But if you're drafting on like underdog, yeah, Jalen Waddle isn't a target for me on half PPR where the catches just aren't weighted that much. Like I personally still believe Jalen Waddle will be, a 100 catch player with Tyreek Hill there. He's still a player that has very good speed. He has that big play upside. He was kind of dealing with an injury last year, right? He was dealing with like an ankle injury, or at least coming off an ankle injury in his rookie year. Coming from college, I should say. And he was very successful on the routes that he ran. He was 7th in his route win percentage. And, but it all comes down to Tua for me. That's what it comes down to with these Dolphins wide receivers. Will Tua take that step forward, and will this offense be put into Tua's hands to go out and win them games? If it is, then okay, I could be a little bit higher on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But if it's not, and they try and shelter and hide Tua and kind of run it very similar to how the 49ers ran it with Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously we know he's coming from San Francisco. How can we be high on any of these guys as a consistent weekly option, especially with like redraft coming around the corner here shortly? And the ceiling games can definitely be affected like that too if they aren't creating different ways to get these guys the ball.
Yeah, Tua is absolutely
the key
X factor.
He's the
I've
key.
been higher on him than you.
He's the key to the Dolphins' success this year. They have the players around him.
Cortland Sutton, I've got him ranked at 17. You've got him ranked at 18. I think that out of all of these guys inside of the top 20, top 24, top 25, Cortland Sutton probably has the highest bust potential out of any of these guys. There are so many different ways I could see this Denver passing game operating. I think it's very easy to envision Cortland Sutton being Russell Wilson's new DK Metcalf. I also think it's really easy to envision targets being really spread out in this offense, and this offense being, once again, relatively run heavy, even with Wilson being there, just obviously more efficient. So I don't know how to rank Sutton. I like his upside more than Jerry Jeudy. That's why I've got him ranked significantly higher, and the market agrees. On underdog, Cortland Sutton is going as the wide receiver 17, Jeudy as the wide receiver 22. So the market is in line with Sutton over Jeudy, Sutton being the primary option for Russell Wilson. I just don't know what to make of him. I think that the range is incredibly wide with Cortland Sutton.
I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about Sutton. I think he's a good player, and I want to be higher on this Broncos offense than most, especially with Russ coming there. But we just haven't seen it out of these guys, and I think that's kind of like giving us that bias against them. Is they really haven't performed in a year or two now, both of them, Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. So I think that's kind of given us a little pause. But personally, I do want to be a little bit higher on the Broncos guys than the consensus.
Next up, we've got Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, a guy that I really want to be high on just from a talent perspective. I think he's absolutely top tier. He had a down year last year. The quarterback play in Washington has been horrific. He's one of those guys who's been plagued by terrible quarterback play his entire career, but the opportunity was absolutely there. He was 4th in air yards last year. He just needs Wentz to be good enough, a big enough upgrade on Heineke to get him the ball, to actually let him realize some of that upside. Is Wentz good enough to do that for Terry?
I mean, he's definitely an upgrade. He's definitely the best quarterback that Terry has had in his career. And very similar to DJ Moore. Like, these are guys you could argue are like top 10, top 12 talents at the position in the entire NFL, just from a prospect profile standpoint. That both of them have been plagued by mediocre coaching and mediocre quarterbacks. And, it's really no different for both DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin. But I personally do believe that Terry McLaurin is, an alpha wide receiver one. His profile is obviously off the fucking charts. He's a great wide receiver, commands targets. He's going to be a 25-30% target share guy. So I definitely still draft Terry McLaurin, just because I feel like you're really not going to get any 25+% target share guys from this point on in drafts. But the upside and the ceiling and the touchdowns could definitely be limited just by the overall incompetence of his offense. So,
yeah, and only 11 red zone targets, which was 71st in the NFL last year. So that's the other thing. It's just that the way that offense runs is when they get into scoring position, they're like throwing to their tight ends, or they're trying to hammer it in with Antonio Gibson. I think that could definitely be a problem for Terry in terms of fantasy. He's just never going to get those short range touchdown opportunities. We've seen that play out for his career up to this point. Maybe things change. I just don't really have any expectation that they do. So him and Moore, to me, yeah, that's a great comparison. They're just, absolutely electric elite talents, but they don't have the quarterbacks to sustain them. It's kind of sad, like these guys get drafted to like the Chargers or the Chiefs, and we're looking at them in totally different ways, All right, we'll close out the show here with a guy that we both have ranked at wide receiver 20. And, he's kind of the OG of that category, if you will. This is the original guy who's been just dripping with talent for year after year and has never had the has never had the quarterback that he's needed to elevate him until now, Joey. Allen Robinson goes to LA, gets to play with Cooper Kupp in this offense, gets to catch passes from Matthew Stafford, who we've already said this very podcast episode is an elevator for the players around him. We're both in on an Allen Robinson year in the Rams offense. We're ahead of consensus. He's the wide receiver 23 on Underdog. Both of our wide receiver 20s. Give us the Allen Robinson case.
Yeah, I just think Allen Robinson is a very talented wide receiver that is going to be in the best situation of his career, with Matt Stafford throwing him the football now on one of the best offenses in the league, with one of the best coaching staffs in the league, and I just want to be high on a player like that. Obviously, we've seen him have monster seasons before, and the consensus isn't, taking into account his 2021 at all, and I don't think we are either. And at the end of the day, I think he's just one of the most talented wide receivers in the league, and he's in a great situation. It's really that simple for me when it comes to A-Rob.
All right. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I want to be in on Allen Robinson this season. Going to continue to take shots on him. And I think that we can stop it here, take a little break. We'll be back on Wednesday with the next 20 or so wide receivers to discuss. If you guys want to check out any of the other rankings we've done, we have podcast shows all over this feed discussing them. And that is going to be it for episode 232 of the DFS Dose podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at the DFS Dose, as well as our personal Twitters. I'm at Ben Hauver, Joey's at Joey Carrion DFS. If you guys want to connect with us and stay up to date with what's going on in the podcast or join our inner circle, the link to do so is via our free Discord channel. You can find that in the show notes to the podcast. To everybody listening out there, we appreciate you. We value you. Until next time, let's stay accountable. Keep it authentic. Vibes.